Well, joining us now to discuss is South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Thank you very much for joining us. First of all, your thoughts on Governor Abbott's what he's calling zero tolerance policy.
I appreciate Governor Abbott's zero tolerance policy and support his right to ship the immigrants who've come across his border illegally to Washington, D.C. Let's see how the president and liberals up here address the situation. I mean, what's going on is a massive crisis of epic proportions along our southern border. And as a member who sits on the oversight committee, we had one hearing on the border last year. And guess what? It wasn't the southern border. It was the northern border, where there are less than 10,000 apprehensions a year. But at the southern border last year, almost 2 million illegal immigrants were apprehended. Those are the ones that we know of. It doesn't include the ones that got through and got away.
Let's hear what Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, had to say about President Biden's border policies and Title 42. Here's what he said.
The Biden administration's open border policies have led to a record number of illegal immigrants crossing the border into the United States. Barack Obama's own Secretary of Homeland Security said that by any measure, having 100,000 people cross the border in 1 month would be a crisis.
You know, Congresswoman, we've been talking about this over a year. We've been talking about what's going on along the border. And I was curious from your discussions in the Capitol or even away from there with your colleagues, do the Democrats really have any interest in stemming the flow of immigrants over, or are they completely okay with this?
There seems to be zero interest, with the exception of Henry Cuellar down in southern Texas. He's the only Democrat that I'm aware of that wants to address the situation. And you see Governor Abbott, he's bearing the brunt of millions upon millions of illegal immigrants who crossed the southern border last year. And on oversight, as I mentioned earlier, we had one committee hearing on the border, and it was about the northern border last year, not the southern border. And whether it's the southern border, whether it's our exit from Afghanistan, whether it's inflation, taxation, spending, now in Ukraine, there's been crisis after crisis with the Biden administration and no plan to address any of it.
How is it impacting the folks in South Carolina, your constituents?
Well, the flow of fentanyl, for sure, we're seeing that drug laced in so many things, and that is affecting communities across South Carolina. Just in my district of South Carolina, the 1st Congressional District last year, in Beaufort, we had an MS-13 gang member arrested pretty far away from the Mexican gang cartels, and he found himself on the coast of South Carolina in the 1st Congressional District. 2 years ago, in my hometown of Goose Creek, South Carolina, in December of 2019, there was a massive human trafficking bust of over 20 people. This kind of thing is affecting communities, not just in Texas, not just along the southern border, but every community across the country.
I wanted to ask you how your particular race is going. We know that in the fall, Democrats are expected to not do very well, let's say. But you want to hold on to your position. I was curious what the dynamics are there. Just as a backstory, we all know that President Trump, you've kind of been on his list because you didn't like what he did on January 6th. But you've gone forward and you have a very broad support with many people in South Carolina. I wanted if you could give us an update on what's going on.
Of course, and I appreciate you asking. I'm a conservative that represents a swing district, and in fact, the Democrat nominee in this race for the 1st Congressional District has raised more money than any of my opponents. And so there's got to be some consideration for that. I'm someone who has almost a perfect 100% scorecard with every conservative report card out there that had known to man right now. And this quarter, in the first 3 months of the year, I raised $1.2 million. None of my opponents, Democrat or Republican, are sharing their numbers on how much they've raised. And if you're a conservative representing a swing district, you have to raise millions and millions of dollars to keep your seat and help Republicans get in the majority this year, even with Biden's numbers being so low. It's for some of us, we have to raise $6, $8, $10 million to do that. I've raised $4.2 million so far this cycle. I had to raise $6 million last time, and we're on track to raise $8 to $10 million this year. But I represent a swing district, and if you can't have the fundraising apparatus to keep your seat, you will not help us get a majority in the fall. And my opponent, quite frankly, lost his seat 4 years ago, and I had to go and win it back. And I did that because I worked really hard for the constituents I represent. And as a conservative, I have a strong history, like Ronald Reagan, of reaching across the aisle and delivering his results. In my first year, I passed 4 bills Just yesterday, I passed 5 bills out of committee. As a conservative in the minority, that is no small feat, and I'm really proud of the record that I'm running on today.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time, because obviously you're incredibly busy, for joining us today. Congresswoman
Thank you
Nancy
so
Mace, thank you.